Hi, welcome to our very first Facebook Live. I'm Rachel Wood, I'm the founder of BIBaDO. So we're running a sort of a webinar today. We're joined by an expert, Geraldine, who is a baby nutritionist. So she ask any questions you want to her. She's here for an hour answering all your questions. And we've also got Abby, who has founded her own baby food company. And she has got lots of hints and tips, and I'm sure there's lots of questions for Geraldine as well. So let's, if I can I start, Geraldine, by asking you a question for weaning? Obviously, I set up BIBaDO because I found weaning a very messy experience with my daughters, and hence me creating our product. But sort of, when is the best time to start weaning your baby? How do you know when you should go for it?
I think the best way to look at it is clues from babies. So there are probably two elements to it, though. One is that we really need to make sure that the digestive tract is in the right place, so ready to receive food.
Okay.
I mean, obviously, in an ideal world, if we can all breastfeed, that's great. If people can't, then that's also great as well. But the most important factor is that the guidelines that state about 6 months are right.
Okay.
They are right, and we really should adhere to about 6 months.
Okay.
Definitely. But going forwards, we need to look for baby to be biting hand, dribbling, reaching for food. So, you know, when they get to that stage where everything you've got in their hand, they want to put in their mouth. And just a point on baby-led weaning, actually, that you generally find that if a child's baby-led wean, they tend to put less things in their mouth.
Oh, really?
Because when you give them foods to eat and you put that food and they're used to reaching for that in their mouth, they actually don't tend to put other things. That's what research shows.
Oh, right.
Anyway.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So my company is the Food Nutritionist, and I'm the founder of the Food Nutritionist, and I've been a nutritionist for over 10 years now. The Food Nutritionist is quite new. And how I got started was with my own son. So I'm not sure if you know, my own son had an extremely bad reaction to foods when he was 4. And we had to actually then get him to hospital as soon as possible. And after that time, that's when I realised how important food is. And that's how I became a nutritionist. Not to say it's been plain sailing for him. He's now 17 now.
What was the reaction? What happened?
So basically what happened was we were just having a normal Sunday afternoon at home. I've always been somebody who's been a bit funny about what my children eat anyway, because I've got 3 boys. And we were having a normal Sunday afternoon at home, and he bit into a chocolate bar. And normally I can be a bit funny about that, but somebody had actually been away and brought it back, and they really wanted it. They're only little, my children.
Yeah.
And so I said, yes, okay, you can have it. He took one bite, and he started sort of reaching and saying to me, oh, I don't feel right, I don't feel right. That's how quick it all was.
Oh, my goodness.
And then his breathing went, he started really breathing funny. So I said, I'm going to put him in a bath, and maybe he just needs to be calmed down a little bit. My husband was going, no, I think this is worse. So luckily my sister was there. She looked after our 2 older boys while we tried to get him to hospital in time, which was touch and go, because halfway there in the car he actually did pass out. So I would always suggest to parents, if a child goes into any kind of reaction, do not try and get them there yourself. Phone an ambulance. You know, if I could go back, that's what I would have done.
Yeah.
Because we actually phoned the ambulance in the car halfway there, and they said either you stay where you are and we'll come to you, or you try and get to the hospital, which we did. Got him into resus, and it was all very scary from them, but just to sort of cap that off, he was fine. You know, he woke up, didn't realise where he was. The last thing he remembered was that he was at home. And so take allergies seriously. I know off camera we were having a brief discussion about allergies and intolerances. Take them seriously.
Yeah. Do you know what the allergy was?
Peanuts.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, peanuts. And so he's always had to have an EpiPen ever since then, even today. And we are always very cautious about when we're eating out and things like that. So, but that's how I became a nutritionist.
Yeah.
And so I suppose the natural progress for me was to go and actually find out more about feeding children. And I love children, I love babies, I love that whole thing of, you know, we're so lucky, they're so precious.
Oh, and they're so gorgeous when they're that age. Mine are a bit older now, they're 7, so I've kind of past the age of cooey, cuddly little babies, but it's such a fab fab
Yeah.
time. Hard work, but a
Yes.
fantastic time.
But very rewarding.
Yes.
Very, very rewarding. And I still think, you know, because obviously mine are a lot older than 7, I still think 7 is lovely.
Yes, mine are very cute at 7. I've just been
After
showing
mine,
everybody
for a couple of
photos.
I'd love to. Are they girls?
Like good and a boy.
So I think the main thing is that, you know, take allergies seriously, but also I think if you can start weaning right,
Yeah.
then that is the most important thing you would do. So
It's identifying as well, I think, isn't it, the difference between allergies and intolerances. We were talking earlier about my business partner's 2 children who had intolerances to dairy. Actually, by very gently introducing them into their diet, and over time and taking time with that, they've actually come out of it now and have no issues. So we get a lot of people come to us at the markets and say, "Oh, my child has a lot of allergies," but you know, how do you just identify if it's an allergy or an intolerance, and then how do you decide whether you should start introducing those things back into your child's diet? What's the approach you should take?
I think when you're looking at intolerances, you're looking at something that doesn't really happen sort of immediately. I think it's more difficult to tell what an intolerance is. Whereas an allergy, I think you tend to see a reaction quite quickly, quite soon after you've actually ingested the item. Or the food, I should say. And that can be in the form of anything. It can be itchy, it can be itchy eyes, you know, sometimes it can be the nose where they're sort of constantly touching their nose. So it can be anything like that. And I think where I really sit, and one of the most important things, is that real food issue. The more our food is quite natural, the more our bodies are able to cope with it. And it's also that balance where you're not having too much of one thing, because that is an issue as well. You know, if a child likes bread and they're always eating bread or breadsticks, it's the same kind of grain, and we want to really mix that up.
Sort of a varied diet, that's what they all say, isn't it? And they're
Very
right,
much
yeah.
so.
Yeah.
But in its more natural form as well, I think, isn't it?
Very much so.
Which so much of our food is processed in a way that it isn't in a very natural state.
Yeah, I mean, if you have to sort of open a packet and you're getting it out of a packet, you have to really question whether that's the right sort of food for us. I mean, really, food grows naturally, doesn't it? And you know, the more sort of, I would suggest a mainly plant-based diet, but then we still need the proteins and we still need the healthy fats in there. They are quite important as well.
Yeah.
And we need to support digestion as well. That's really good. So.
Oh, we've just had a question come in from Sarah. Thank you for your question, Sarah. My daughter was born a month premature. She is on 1 meal a day and is 6 months old. I'm giving her pureed food, but I'm so worried about baby led weaning because the problems she had. Sorry, let me just open this question. The problems she had at birth. She has everything I have, but mushed up. Is this okay?
I think it is okay, and I think if a child is premature, I do think that we have to be very careful, and there is possibly sometimes, depending on what the circumstances are and how the child is, that we may well need to delay that weaning. So I think doing 1 meal a day is a really, really good idea.
And which meal would you start with usually?
I think most people start with lunch because I just think lunch is a lot easier and it makes sense. Especially if you make your dinner the night before, then you can take part of that and you can. I think lunch is the best one to start with.
Yeah, and I guess you've got time. You've had the morning. As a mum, you're kind of still fresh. And the evening meal before bath time's never the best time to try something new, is it?
And they're a lot more tired perhaps at that time of the day.
Yeah.
So I think lunchtime is the best one. I think that I would try once they hit 7-8 months to introduce a bit more solid food. You don't necessarily have to mash it up. And I would still do a little bit of baby weaning. You know, you can just put a little bit of cooked carrot and just see what the reaction is. Just put it there, see whether the baby wants to pick it up, put it in their mouth, and just try gently, slowly. Remember that there's so much research out there that there's no issues with choking. I would really give it a go.
One of the things I read when my daughter was starting out, because you do get those moments where you think they're choking, but they have their gag reflex is very far forward, isn't it? So sometimes it's not actually that they're choking, even though you think they might be, and you have a few
and it's very frightening when you get that kind of...
ripping them out of the chair.
Yeah. I mean, the most important thing that I've really got to stress 100% is you need to be there. You know, don't go out of the room at all.
Yeah.
Leave everything.
Yes.
If you're feeding your child, do not go out of the room. So that's the one thing that I will definitely stress.
Yeah.
But the rest of it is really to try and be relaxed
Mhm.
and eat with your child, especially with baby-led weaning.
Yeah.
So you could be sitting there eating your food, you know, as well while your child's
Yeah.
eating theirs. But I definitely think it's worth always putting whole foods down just to see whether what the reaction is. So, sorry, what was the name of the mum?
So that was Sarah Lester.
So Sarah, I really hope that answers your questions.
Your microphone apparently is a little bit quiet. So,
Okay.
all right, is that better? Is that better? Right, brilliant. Okay.
The other thing that we were talking about earlier as well, isn't it, is that when you start weaning, it can be how much should they be eating? Is it important? You know, my son didn't like to eat a lot of food at all for the first sort of 6 months of trying. And is it true that actually it's more play than, you know, and milk is most important in that first year? You know, how much should you be worried about what your child is eating?
I think that you need to really listen to your child, look at what your child wants to eat, look at how they react to the food. So if you've got them sitting, you know, next to you when you're eating as a family, that's great. But let them lead you, let them guide you, and they certainly will. They'll certainly guide you. And you are 100% right in saying that milk is the most important thing. Breast milk, whether that's breast milk, whether that's you choose to use formula, that's absolutely fine. But that's got to be the most important thing. And one thing you can do is you can mix it in with the food as well. So if you want to, say, start with carrots, just say, for instance, and you want to use a pureed carrot, you can mix some of your breast milk in with it. That's what I did.
Yeah.
I used to mix all that in and then give it to the baby. And there wasn't so much breastfeeding baby-led weaning around when I did mine, and I really, I definitely love baby-led weaning. In my master, we did a whole module on it, and I was really blown away by it. And I know if it was around, then I definitely would have done it. Not to say I didn't do it, because I think naturally you would give your child foods to pick up themselves anyway, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But I've got some lovely photographs of babies with a whole sort of bits of broccoli, you know, sucking on them and things like that. So yes, you're quite right. Milk is the main priority in that first year. Let them play around. You know, I know it can be a bit messy, but let them play around. Let them have fun, because that's what having food's about. I think sometimes we're so fixed on certain things with food, and we're so worried about certain things. We need to just relax. If you give real food, you won't have an issue.
Okay, I've got another question. Can you hear me on this microphone, or do you want me to have...
So I've got another question. So this is from Catherine Marshall. She has written in a bit earlier, actually. She's not on the live feed, but she did baby-led, traditional weaning with her first baby. So I think a lot of purees, like you say. But she wants to go for baby-led weaning for number 2. But she's just a little bit worried about them getting enough nutrients. And because she's worried that most of it's going to get spat straight out. So could you just put her at ease about that?
And I hope, Catherine, you'll tune in later if you're not tuning in now, and and hear my answer. Definitely, really don't worry about it. Be really relaxed about it. They're going to take what they need at this time. Feed them real food, and they will take what they need at this time, and mainly make sure that you are giving milk. And again, take it slowly, take it easily. Start with 1 meal a day. My suggestion is always to start with vegetables and then bring in other foods. So just be confident. You're doing a good job. You're doing a good job.
Oh, very good answer. Okay, we've got another question. This is from Lauren Herbert. She says, I have twins and they are both so different in what they enjoy eating and how they eat it. My girl twin is loving baby-led weaning and seems to be doing great on it. My boy twin will not happily pick things up and feed himself as readily. He needs lots of encouragement and most of it ends up on the floor. But give him mashed up food on a spoon and he'll happily eat the whole bowl. Any tips for weaning twins, please? That sounds quite hard, actually. My twins, I have twins as well, so I've been there, and I just made sure we did exactly the same thing. My twins were identical, so I think personality-wise they're quite similar as well, so that did help. So yes, having non-identical twins, a boy and a girl, it's very different personalities, and trying to introduce meals.
Yeah, I mean, I think do what you're doing. You know, if they're going to be doing separate things, then that's absolutely fine, because you would even find that across families, even if they're not twins. You would find that different children want to do different things, and by some of the things, boys tend to be a little bit more lazier than girls. Should I say that? So I would actually, you know, they're eating together. You know, with twins, I'm sure that you're feeding them at the same time. So just let them lead you, and if he likes his a little bit mashed up, then just mash it up and give him a spoon. And don't worry about it being on the floor. Make sure that you have that area covered. You have the children covered as well. And yeah, just let them enjoy their food. Let them start that way. It's all more about play in the first few stages than it is about really, really them getting a lot from that food.
The other thing I wanted to ask about is flavour with food, because I think a lot of what you get told at the beginning is to introduce food slowly and be careful of not sort of giving them too much flavour when their sort of taste buds are so immature and still growing. But actually, I found with my children that they wanted a lot of flavour. So I don't know if it's because they were breastfed, if that had any impact. But my son in particular likes hot, spicy curries. And it's just understanding, you know, how do you approach that with kids? Should you be gently and slowly introducing them into flavour, or actually let them try lots of flavours early on?
I think let them try lots of flavours. I'd be a bit cautious first of all when you first set out, as normal, but let them try lots of, you know, there's lots of herbs out there, there's lots of exciting foods. You know, let them out in the garden, show, you know, if you can get them somewhere. I used to take my children out to a farm which was in Maidenhead, not far from where I live, and they used to sow seed by hand. So we used to sort of sow the seed by hand, and we'd be you know, playing games, going around the garden, looking at different things. And that was similar to what I had as a child, because I used to go out to a manor house in Wiltshire, and I remember that they had a cook there, and she used to say, oh, go out to the garden and get me some sweet peas, or go out to the garden. And so I'd run out there and get these you know, we'd get these, and I remember as well, Shelley.
Yeah, I remember that.
There's something so lovely about being involved with the food that you eat, rather than where we go to the supermarket, it's all in a packet. It just makes you appreciate it, I think, more, don't you? We've just had another question from Millie. We're going to be starting baby-led weaning in a few weeks' time. What would you recommend as first foods to try?
I would always go for the vegetables, always, always, always. So what you need to be looking at is vegetables that you can make quite soft and quite easy. I mean, obviously, so for instance, if you're going to give them a carrot, it must be cooked. So that's where I'd start. I would, and also don't make the food too small. Make it quite nice and bite-sized so that they can pick up with their hands. You can go for... the reason why I suggest vegetables is the sugar content. You've got a lot less sugar content in vegetables than you have in say, the fruits. You can bring in fruits later. You can bring in fruits raw. But initially, I'd start with cooked foods, and I'd start with things like the vegetables. So carrots is a good one. You can even try a little bit of broccoli. You know, if you get the stem broccoli, you can steam it lightly and get them to see whether they'll suck it. Baby-led weaning is just amazing. I mean, they actually really love it and really connect with their food. And, you know, all of that sucking motion and that being able to pick it up and just be free and take it in their own speed. Because what you find is that they won't overeat. And you'll find that they'll eat the right amount. And when they've had enough, they will stop. So, and then look at your food. What is your food like? Different foods you can try as well. And even pieces of meat, you can get them to suck as well. So enjoy. This time is so precious. It goes so quickly. Honestly, before you know it, they're walking out the door saying, see you later. So enjoy it.
Do you have to be completely pure about it as well, though? Because I know that we've sort of had some debates about people who do baby-led weaning, and lots of people are very much is very pure. You let them; it's all food that they can hold. But actually, I found with Amelie, she liked a bit of. She did sometimes want to just be spoon-fed, and sometimes she did want to just eat food. So we kind of did a combination with her of the spoon-fed meals and then just finger food. So you know. We made sure, I guess, her diet was very varied by offering her different formats of food as well. And I think that's maybe why she's always been quite a good eater. But I think, you know, should you do that? Is that the right thing to do? Is there any wrong answer?
I think there's no right or wrong way. I have parents that say to me they don't want a baby-led wean at all. They only want a puree food. They only want a spoon feed. And that's 100% fine. We work with that. I have parents that want to do both, so do a combination, and I would say probably that's what I did, a combination. And then I have parents that only want to baby-led wean. And so I think that it's really where you're at, where you feel comfortable. It's the same thing, like, you know, some parents, I breastfed mine. I breastfed mine for a year. Mine never had a bottle. I had a problem with my middle son in the fact that I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't go anywhere at all. I remember a couple of times I went out and my husband was like, "You need to come back because he's screaming and I can't do anything."
I had the same thing there.
Yeah, and he didn't have that sucking reflux with the bottles, so I had to put him straight on a cup. So it's so individual, and I really, you know, follow your instincts as a parent, because there's so many times you get a bit worried and everything. Like, what does your instinct say? You are right, and you will know if something's wrong. And so, you know, I really, and I, you know, a lot of the time, if we look at the history of baby-led weaning, that's what we would have done. We would never have given children pureed food or gone in the shops and bought food. We, you know, in the 1940s, that was unheard of. You would have waited till that baby could sit up and putting things to their mouth and dribbling and not so much being settled with having bottles, and you would have started giving it your own foods, because that's the only thing that you could do. You know, you didn't have all of these shops and supermarkets and everything that we have today.
I think it sort of almost encourages you to just follow that one way of doing things as well, doesn't it? You go to the supermarket and it tells you that a meal is only for a 4-month-old, or for a 6-month-old, and you're like, I can't touch that, I can't use that. You get very kind of stuck with the labels that foods give you sometimes.
We've had another question in from Ali Rooney. Hi, Ali. We are often told that breastfed babies can become iron deficient if not eating enough solids by age 1. My daughter has been baby-led weaning since 6 months and will be 1 in a couple of weeks. She's still not eating a lot of food, mostly playing with it or sucking it or spitting it out. When should I worry about her not eating enough or having low iron? That's a really good question, actually. Thank you for that, Ali.
That is a really, really, really good question, Ali, and there are different things that you can do. Some, I mean, I'm not sure if you're vegetarian or not, but some of the things that I will advise a mum to do is actually just get some bones, boil up the bones, make yourself some broth, mix it, you know, add, I know she's baby-led wean, but you can still put it in the food, because you can actually cook some of the foods in broth, and actually let her suck that, and then you'll make sure that she does get an adequate amount of iron.
It's a really good idea, really interesting idea.
Yeah, and that's one thing I say that we...
Is that good for the mother as well then, to have the bone broth, so that it helps with the breast milk?
So good. I mean, I really can't stress. It's really healing. It's one of the best things that you can do, and it's quite cheap. You know, you can go to your local butchers and they will give you it free. They have a certain day, or you can just strip off the carcass of a chicken, and you can. I've got a slow cooker that I throw mine in. You can freeze it. I keep mine. I have mine in the fridge all the time. Sometimes I just drink it on its own. I put vegetables in and boil it up. So my children have had that from quite young. And
it's a bit like a stock. You make it. Is it a bit like a stock? So you sort of just run us through how you make bone broth, because I think I've heard of it, because I know sort of it's quite popular with the Hollywood celebs, isn't it? They're all drinking bone broth. But yeah, if you have a recipe or sort of a tip on how to make it, that would be fab.
Yeah, I do have a recipe on my website of how to make it, because so yes, you can go to the foodnutritionist.co.uk and see my bone broth recipe there. But it's most simple. I mean, if you have a slow cooker, it's easier. So with a slow cooker, I throw the bones in and I'll probably leave them overnight. I might even leave them the next day for most of the day as well, because obviously the water level is not going to go down. If you're boiling it on the stove, please be careful of the water level of it. I just put a little bit of salt in it. Now, obviously, if the baby is under a year old, I wouldn't put the salt in it. But if they're over a year or coming up to a year, then you can put a bit of salt in it. I put peppercorns in it. Another thing that I do is I get all of my vegetables when I'm peeling my vegetables. I never throw away any of the carrot peelings or anything. I've got a bag in the freezer they all go into. That bag comes out. I could throw all of that. And if I juice, I put all that in it as well in my bone broth. And then at the end of it, when I've made the bone broth, I just strain it off. And so instead of using salt for a baby under the year of 1, you can put herbs in. And then at the end of the day, you can strain it off, and then you can cook their food in it and do different things like that. That way, you're making sure they're getting enough iron. If you're vegetarian, then that's a different process, and really you need to be looking at foods that contain iron, so lentils and things like that you need to be cooking up.
We are getting more and more people who come to us actually at the markets who are talking about looking for vegan options and vegetarian options, and that was something that we were discussing earlier on actually, is what, for people who want to choose to follow a vegan or vegetarian diet, what things should they be making sure they include to make sure that any of those nutrients are being sort of covered?
Yes, I mean, I think it's if you're going to be a vegan, and then you really need to understand how you do it. And I think we need to look at using a lot of the pulses and beans, and those sort of things should be included. So, vegetarianism is a bit easier, but if you're a vegan, then you definitely need to be looking at your pulses. You need to be including things like nuts, and you need to be really careful when you're giving babies nuts. So certainly I would be grinding them up, putting them in foods in that way. So those are the best ways that you're going to get your best source out of there. There are other things, but I think just to keep it quite plain today and keep it quite straight today, we'll focus on those sort of foods for baby.
Yeah.
Okay. We have another question from Farah Malik. She wrote in actually earlier, so I'm hoping she's watching us today. Hi, Farah. Hi, Farah. I'm baby-led weaning my 7-month-old, and she's having a varied and healthy diet so far. I've seen plenty of evidence that food is being swallowed, but most days it seems as though not much is being digested. I've been wondering if offering whole food instead of purees could cause or lead to a nutritional deficit.
Okay, so offering whole foods, I'm assuming that you mean instead of pureed. Was that the question? So offering whole foods.
Yes, or whether not giving purees, or maybe she should do the two together because she's worried that they're not absorbing the nutrition when she's seeing the whole food coming out the other end, I guess.
Right, okay, thank you for that clarity. I hope that's okay. Right, well, I think you need to look at the food. We need to look at insoluble and soluble fibre. So the digestive tract needs a certain amount of food that goes down to it that actually just is roughage and just packs out the bowels to enable the bowels pushed against so that the stool can actually come out. I know that sounds, but there's very much involved in that when you've got babies around. And so an example would be you might see sweet corn in the stool. Well, what would actually happen is the body has broken down the inner part, which is the soluble fibre. That part has been taken and been digested. And what you're seeing on the outside is you're seeing the insoluble part. So an apple is a really good, when you look at it, an apple is the way that you'd look at it. And you think, right, okay, an apple, you can't see any of that coming out. That's because the outside of the apple is the roughage, and that's the body has kind of like broken that down sufficiently, but you won't be able to tell that it's apple anymore because it's been amalgamated into your stool. Whereas sweet corn, because it's so small and so sweet, because it's so small, that tends not to happen as much. But believe me, the body's taken out what it needs from that, and so really, really don't worry about it as long as you're giving them milk as well, as long as you're touching all bases. And like she said, you're giving them a healthy diet, a variety of different things, then I'm sure that's all great and it's all good to go.
So I've got another question. I am actually gluten intolerant, which has been for sort of 4 years. So I found that out sort of around the time I was weaning my children. And I had to sort of change my diet fairly drastically. So from eating, I ate a pretty healthy diet, but it sort of had to obviously eliminate quite a large amount of foods, or sort of certainly over the things that we can buy in the supermarket fairly easily, and change to gluten-free. And I was a little bit concerned because I was so sensitive to it. I had to sort of cut it out from the whole house. So my children have actually always followed a gluten-free diet. And I've had sort of conflicting advice from various people as to whether that's a good thing or a bad thing. But it was really for my health benefit that we had to, even if I had a crumb of gluten, I would be pretty unwell afterwards. So have you got any advice on that?
Certainly, what I would say to you is there's absolutely nothing wrong with actually your children being on a gluten-free diet. If you're sensitive to gluten or you have an intolerance, or then the likelihood is that one of yours may well have that as well, because it does go down the line. You can provide a perfectly good diet without having gluten in it. Just the same way you can provide a perfectly good vegan diet, providing you touch all bases. And one thing I will say that's maybe going to be a little bit controversial, there are no essential carbohydrates in the diet. There's not one. There are essential fats. We definitely need to have fatty acids, and in a vegan diet you definitely need to make sure you get your fatty acids. That is unbelievably important, especially when we go to B12, so possibly look at supplementation of that. There are essential amino acids. There are 9 essential amino acids. There were 8, there are now 9. But there are no essential carbohydrates. That's not to say that we don't need carbohydrates. Of course we do, because carbohydrates come in all different forms. So we could be looking at potatoes, we could be looking at strawberries, and I think people forget that they're carbohydrates. So all of the vegetables, the only ones that aren't are peas that are proteins, and avocado, and obviously an avocado is a fat. So, and that's something that a vegan could actually really include, so that they're making sure that they're touching their bases with fat. But what I would say to you is that there is absolutely nothing wrong with, if that's your household, and if it's going to make you really ill, there's no point in having that in your household. So I think that one of the best, you're doing the right thing. There may well be a difference when they go out and they get older and they start trying different foods with outside the home, and they may well try it then.
Do you have to be careful of that sort of transition? So if they've had a very clean gluten-free diet, can potentially the exposure to it become a problem for them later? Should you allow them to have a little bit of exposure so that it doesn't then manifest itself as an intolerance?
I think that, so as with my son with peanuts, we kind of clean the whole lot out of the house. But I've actually tried to sort of, I mean, obviously he's severe, but I try to look at a program to actually make him more tolerant to peanuts. But I think that, I'm sure your children go to other places. They may well, go to other places that it will be there. Even in a coffee shop it will be there. So they will still be getting the exposure to it, even though it might not be within their own home. And so, it's really to, I'm sure you're quite relaxed about that type of thing. Am I right in saying that?
Yes, pretty much. I mean, I do. I have actually found that when they do have both of them get a bit of an upset tummy. So, it's sort of learnt by sort of process of elimination, really, that they're probably like me. So we do, but I'm not as worried that, they were. I was quite unwell, whereas, they haven't been unwell with it. We've had another question actually from Catherine Marsh.
Can I just say just one thing on that point? It takes on average about 12 years for somebody to be diagnosed as a celiac. And there also is non-gluten celiac sensitivity. So you may well be tested for and you may say, oh, we're not necessarily a celiac, but you may still well be. So, and you can Google that and it'll give you a lot of information on it. So if you are getting a lot of issues, and if your child's getting a lot of issues, then you really do need to look at that and perhaps sometimes ask to be tested for that. Okay? Sorry, we're moving on to the next question.
Yes, on that note, actually, I sort of worked it out myself actually in the end, because I went to the doctors and my blood results were negative actually to celiacs, but I was still pretty unwell. So yes, do seek advice, and I think there's a lot more awareness. It was 4 years ago that I was diagnosed, so there is more awareness out there these days. Anyway, back to the next question. Sorry, Catherine, for delaying you.
Sorry, Catherine.
Yeah, sorry, Catherine. So how strict do I need about salt in things like pasta sauces? My daughter is 9 months. Very good question.
That's a really, really good question. I mean, it depends on what you're purchasing. If you're purchasing ones specifically for children, then obviously they will have a lot less salt in it. If you're purchasing ones for the whole family to have, then there will be more salt in it. If I'm honest with you, 9 months, as long as they're really healthy, I don't think it would be too much of an issue. And remember that they're not having the whole packet. So, if you're using a sauce and you're purchasing a sauce, they're not actually having the whole packet. They're only having a small amount of it. So I wouldn't be unduly worried unless you're seeing some kind of reaction there. So 9 months, I would say, if they've had normal birth, normal delivery, no major issues, and I wouldn't really see a problem in it. It's more about you adding it to the different foods. That's where I would be saying that you need to be very, very careful when you're adding it to foods. I hope that answers your question.
And actually, Abby, given that your sort of business is baby food, how do you...
So we don't add salt to what we do, because it's if parents then choose to add salt themselves later, they can. There are ingredients that we do use that contain salt sometimes, like cheese, and occasionally on some of the dishes we use soy sauce, but it's in a very small amount. But we have deliberately chosen to not add any salt to what we do. But that is one thing that I'm actually quite interested about, because salt became it had such a bad reputation for a long time. But actually, I'm starting to become a lot more mindful of sugar. And just how much sugar there is in our children's diets. And in particular, I know there are certain fruits that are better than others, but we give our kids so much fruit, and then there's sugar and other things that we give them. Actually, how important is sugar in their diet, and how do we manage that better?
Well, I tend to limit fruit. What I would suggest is that we are now in May, so we will start having an abundance of fruit now. But if in January, what sort of fruits if you were to say from today, I'm only going to buy fruit and vegetables that are in season, how many fruits could you buy?
Yeah, that's the thing. It's so different now in the supermarkets. Everything's available, isn't
that's
it? You
right.
buy,
Yeah. So what I would be suggesting, I say the most you should really give your child a day is 2 to 3 pieces of fruit.
Oh, wow.
Different types. And I would say try and aim for about 7 or 8 different types of vegetables.
Mm-hmm.
Vegetables grow all the year round. Fruits do not.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I'd be saying. So looking at a portion, I try and get people to sort of portion out for a child the palm of their hand. It's quite an easy way to do it. So what you can do is when you're giving them fruits, you can, strawberries, you can put them in the palm of their hand. For an adult, it's about 80 grams. A portion, but for a child it really does depend on them and their size, and like I said, I normally try and go for the hand, but I would definitely not let them have too much fruit. I definitely wouldn't. Just 2 to 3 pieces max a day.
Because things like raisins is like your favourite go-to snack for your kids, isn't it? The amount of raisins some of my children eat. But are they, because they've been dried, are they much higher?
They're much higher, much higher. Again, I wouldn't be that keen to just give raisins on their own. I would be looking to give them with a protein and a fat at the same time. So I would, natural yogurt is quite an easy one to do for children. I think in regards to sweeteners, if I'm giving natural yogurt, I tend to try and chop up some nuts. So I use my my rolling pin and I just bash up the nuts like that, add them in so that they're not too big, so that they're nice and bite-sized for the children. And then I might add a little bit of honey, which should be cold pressed, by the way. Again, we're going back to this trying to get food to be really natural. Or maple syrup's the other one that I use. And so it's really about how you put your meals together. One of the issues, I think, is if you're just giving carbohydrates on their own, you need to really think about that. And most snacks are just a carbohydrate. So you really need to, you can add a bit of cream cheese in it. If you're baby-led weaning, then you can put a bit of celery with some cream cheese on it and let the baby suck that and see. So it's I think the point about salt is 100% right. We need to be more worried about sugar than we do about salt. Definitely. I think guidelines are going to set to change. I think there's so much going on at the moment. We need to have guidelines to change, and I'm really excited to kind of be part of that. So there's lots and lots of undercurrents of things that are going on at the moment, and guidelines, I think, have no choice to be changed. We're still stuck a bit in the 1980s. And sometimes I get quite frustrated in the fact that we're saying that they shouldn't have certain foods, but then on the other hand, we're opening a packet and giving them, a highly processed, dried food. Is that a good idea? I don't think so.
My daughter, I notice in particular, I've got to be careful with the sugar with her. It definitely has an impact on her moods and her behaviour, which I don't see in anything else. So if she has too much sugar, she can be an absolute nightmare, to be honest. That's why I'm kind of looking at it at the moment, going, right, how am I going to take this out of her diet?
Well, I can tell you a story about my children. We were in the garden, a beautiful sunny day. We had swings and paddling pool. I have 3 boys, so they were all playing really nicely. The neighbours' children were in. So there was about 6 to 8 children in the garden. And my neighbour 2 doors up, she came in with some sweets. And she's just before I was a nutritionist, and she opened the packet of sweets and gave them some sweets each. And I remember it had those blue Smarties. I don't know whether they're still around now, but
I remember that.
Had blue Smarties. And this quiet, serene picture within 5 minutes went to them hitting each other, pushing each other. One mum said, "I'm taking him home. I can't deal with this." And that was one of the realisations for me on how powerful and what can happen if you give your children that type of food. So, you know, and it's difficult with grandmas because they always want to be feeding your children different things. I went through that. But what I will say to you is that there's nothing like just giving them real food. Even be careful with things like grapes. They are really, really high in sugars. I mean, obviously, if their baby's really young and you're baby-led weaning, you need to cut them in half. But again, there's different things that you can add in and try and look at, you know, even olives. Olives are great. See whether you can get them to have the little olives and things like that.
That's a funny one, olives, actually, because it's the thing that when you tell people that your kids like olives, which mine do, they're always really surprised. But yet, all of the kids that I know, I don't think I know a child that doesn't really like olives. I mean, it's salty, it's a snack, they can eat it really easily. It's actually something that most kids, I think, enjoy. But sometimes it's your behaviour as a parent, isn't it? If you don't like it, you don't give it to your kids.
That's right.
You know, I'm quite varied in what I eat, so my kids eat, you know, will try
wide
a lot of
variety.
things. But yeah, that's, I suppose, is that something you should be mindful to try and do? If you don't like something, don't portray that onto your children.
Definitely. And I think there's so much food out there that we need to kind of try and give them as much variety as possible. And also you can let them be involved, you know, when you walk around the supermarket where all the veg is, you know, try and see what they like.
What would you want to?
So I've sort of another question just on that. Actually, this is one of my questions. Actually, is that you know, if your baby or child is sort of a lower weight, so my children have never been heavy; they're always sort of on the lower centiles of weight, and they're just naturally sort of quite slim children. So I worry about reducing, sort of making sure they're getting enough food, and obviously sometimes the easiest thing is a banana, or so they probably do have more sugar. What should I do different to make sure they're, you know, getting the right stuff, but, you know, not too much sugar? So what would you go for instead as a sort of a after school snack or sort of an afternoon snack for the little ones?
Okay, well, I suppose that goes down to what we were saying. Things like olives, things like avocado. Try the kind of healthy fats and see where, you know, chop up the avocados. You can do cheese, you know, little bits of cheese as well. You can do, I'm always, one of the things I like talking about is natural yogurt, and that's mainly for the gut bacteria, because gut bacteria is quite important in children. I mean, that's a whole other thing where I could talk about gut bacteria. So it's really about that wide variety of things, and if they're not intolerant to nuts, then nuts as well. Nuts are really good.
My daughter really enjoys sliced up apple with a nut butter. So I have an almond butter or peanut butter. But I make sure I buy the ones that are just 100% nuts, rather than your sun pack. Because actually, again, when you read that, all the palm oils and all the sugars that go into it, say the 100% ones, and actually it isn't as sweet and it's a more natural flavour, and I think it's better for her palate. So and she loves that. That's one of her favourite things.
Yeah, definitely. Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does. Think that was brilliant. So Lynn, I think Traub, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, Lynn.
Hi, Lynn.
Hi, many thanks for your service. My 19-month-old daughter has upset stomach, so she's had baby diarrhoea. But besides this, is well and happy. I'm not really sure what she should eat now. Today she mostly ate white bread and crackers. She refuses rice and chicken. Once the diarrhoea is gone, can I immediately go back to normal food, or should I wait a couple of days? So dealing with an upset tummy.
Dealing with an upset tummy, well, there's definitely a few things that I can advise you to do. And number one is going back to the bone broth that I mentioned earlier with some vegetables. You have to be careful when somebody's got an upset tummy, how you put the vegetables in. So I probably wouldn't be giving a lot of vegetables, but what I would be doing is cooking it in bone broth and having the children drink it, if they'll do that. The other thing you can do is give stewed apple. Stewed apple is actually really good for digestion, so really, really good, and a little bit of natural yogurt in the stewed apple. What we want to do is actually bind the stool again, and the question surrounding whether or not you should carry on giving them the normal foods after. Yes, you should. So once you've binded the stool, then really you need to start gently and slowly, but actually trying to give them whole foods again, and just keeping an eye on it. Please don't let it go on for too long. If it does, then you need to seek advice. That's one thing I will say. So those are the different things. I hope that answers your question.
Great. So we're kind of running out of questions now. So have you got any more questions? I think we've answered all the ones that have come in.
It was interesting saying about the gut bacteria. And one of the journeys that Sophie went on, who's Jack's mum from Jack and Emily, was she read a lot about the sort of gut fauna for very young babies and giving them time to develop. You know, should we be thinking about putting probiotics into our kids' diets? I'm always unsure about supplements for children. and what ones you should do and what ones you shouldn't, and you know, what is the right path to take if you're looking at supplements or probiotics and that type of thing.
100%. I encourage some of my mums that have issues and they're breastfeeding to put a probiotic on their nipple when they breastfeed so that the baby gets it. It is. There's so much research around it now. So much research, but one of the most important things I will say, it depends on how the baby's born. So it will have different gut bacteria if it's born by C-section, and if it's born vaginally, it will have a different gut bacteria. So vaginally, it will mainly take its what we have bifidobacterium, which will come from the mother and father. If it's taken, if we have caesarean section, then it tends to take its first breath. So it'll be from the doctors and the people that have delivered it around, and then it will be lactobacillus. It'll be a different type. Now, I'm naming 2 different bacteria. There are billions and billions and billions of bacteria. So it's not there are just 2. There are billions and billions and billions of bacteria. The baby will also get the bacteria from the breast milk as well. And there are some on the market at the moment. There are some milks that actually have probiotics in. I would advise you to use those.
Where is your best source to buy? Because that's what I find very overwhelming at times, is that, you know, you can go to your supermarket and you can see some vitamins for children, but sometimes you're told they don't contain the right level. So, you know, where is the best place to go to get the best quality vitamins or the probiotic, or to know which is the right one to buy?
I definitely wouldn't go to the supermarket to buy. I would recommend that you just consult a nutritionist. I really wholeheartedly do. They can tell you exactly which ones to use. They can also just give you some more advice, even if you're just speaking to them over the phone for a little while. They definitely know best. I definitely think it's worth just speaking to a nutritionist. Most nutritionists you can ring and speak to them free for 10, 15 minutes on the phone, or 20 minutes. And there are some certain probiotics that are for children. There are certain ones that are for babies. I mean, I don't want to sort of really mention names here. I don't think that would be fair. But there are certain ones that I think are really, really important, and if your baby has got skin issues, you really need to be giving it a probiotic. I'm quite passionate, as you can see, about this, because I think that you know, I dealt with a lady that had her first child had such horrendous skin and bowel issues, and she didn't want the same to happen with her daughter, so I worked with her. There were certain foods that I suggested that she didn't put when she was weaning, and certain foods that we did put in. So we took her on a journey, and she's had no skin issues with her second child and no bowel issues with her second child. So it really, really is important. I think the more we look at probiotics, the more we look at gut bacteria, the more we get to understand. There's a really good paper that's called we've forgotten about this gut bacteria, because we look under a microscope, but with the gut bacteria, we need to go even deeper to see it. So you can look under a microscope and see cells, but you need to go even deeper. And we are so made up of gut bacteria. You know, we're not this cleansed, clean person. That we're kind of we need to be clean. Please don't think that we don't need to. You know, we do need to be clean. But I had my second son at home. And, you know, and in our own environment, in our own, what I would say, your own environment is, you know, providing. I'm not talking about, you know, one of the biggest things for infection in the UK. One of the biggest things was when we didn't have sewage running under our houses, and we got a sewage system. Okay, and that was even better than the vaccines. That was the biggest turning point in this country. For us to, and not just this country, but worldwide, for us to actually get the sewage away. And so what you've got to look at it now is the fact that, yes, we need to have an environment that's clean, but not sterile. And that's the issue. You know, sometimes I dread it when I see all these hand things. Yes, if you're in a hospital and you're in that environment and you've got people that are ill, yes, you do need to do that. But in your own home, no, you don't. You don't need any of these plug-in air fresheners. Open your window, let the air in, and that's how you keep your house fresh. You know, dust, the normal things. That
was some of the advice actually from the midwives, and when I first had Amelie, was that when you go to other people's houses or places you don't know, fair enough, sterilise your bottles, but actually at home, just keep them clean, because it's in their own environment. So definitely, that's what we did. Yeah, we tried to, and actually I got quite relaxed when that happened. It's like, oh, brilliant, because you can get very stressed out at the beginning when you've got a newborn and you're thinking everything's got to.
There's so many things that you're learning, and it's sort of, I found that my mum always had the right answer because she had experience. So I listen to your mums. Most mums, they've been there, they've done it, and they've...
Your grandmother.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and the
Or your grandmother.
So we've got one final question from Lizzie Jones. She said,
Lizzie.
"Hi, Lizzie." She says, "My 18-month-old seems to eat everything I put in front of her. Should I limit her food portions, or do they know when they are full? She's on the 98th centile for height and weight, but it's always been a good eater."
That is an absolute fantastic question. Thank you for that question. What I really would be intrigued to know what type of food. That's the main thing. We've already talked about sugar quite a lot, and if you're basically when you look at gut bacteria, some of the cells like sugar. They want to be fed sugar. I mean, I've got a really, really, really good video that I show people that actually talks about all the different tastes on the tongue, and it basically says, "Oh, everybody likes sugar. We all like sugar," and people do. Even people that say to me, "Well, I don't really have a lot of sugar," and then when I break their diet down and I highlight that, because sugar to your body can be bread. It can be crisps, it can be chips. So we're trying to understand where our carbohydrates are coming from and how they all turn to glucose in the body, different levels. So anyway, going back to your question, Lynn, is it Lynn? Sorry, Lizzie. Sorry, Lizzie. Going back to your question, Lizzie, what I would say to you is that it's really about the type of foods that she's eating. If at every meal she's having protein, fat and carbohydrates and you're combining them all, then that's absolutely fine. Make sure she's active, on a lovely day like this. I'm sure you're already doing it. Take her to the park. But if she's just craving a lot of carbohydrates, then really you need to think about how you're putting your meals together and limit those type of foods, especially if you're taking them out of packets and things like that. That's the best advice that I can give you, so I hope that's okay.
Sort of on that note, when you're sort of dividing up the plate, they used to say it should be, was it 50% carbohydrates, or what? I can't remember what are the right what are the right proportions?
So what I tend to do is I tend to get a plate, and I tend to say that a quart. So if you split it into quarters, split it into quarters. So 1/4 would be your protein and your carbohydrate, because as nature has it, they namely are wrapped up together. You always get a carbohydrate and a protein together. Chicken, you would get a carbohydrate and you'd get healthy fats in that as well, good fats. Then I would give 1 portion of starchy vegetables. So that portion of starchy vegetables can be, I talk about vegetables growing under the ground. So it could be sweet potato, it could be any kind. Carrots, they're a starchy vegetable as well. And then on the other side, I tend to try and give 3 portions of non-starchy vegetables. So that could be broccoli, that could be green beans, that could be salad. That could be tomatoes, although they're technically a fruit, but that could be tomatoes. And that's how I will always think about putting a plate together, not just for a child, but for an adult as well. Does that make sense? I hope that answers your question even further.
Well, Geraldine, thank you so much. Abby, thank you so much. We're kind of just about running out of time now. So please let us know if you enjoyed this Facebook Live. We'll do it again. Hopefully we'll persuade Abby and Geraldine to come back to answer more of your questions, and maybe we might try and work through some recipes or something maybe next time to show.
Demonstrations.
Yes, the demonstrations might be really useful. Let us know if you'd like to see that. Just comment on the Facebook comments below on the live screen so we can get some feedback off you. And thank you very much for watching.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.